gospel. We're not there yet. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. If you're visiting with us up on the board, or if this is your first class you've attended with us, we're in the book of 3 John. We've been going through a big picture overview of the Bible. We initially started in the Old Testament a couple years ago, transitioned our way through the Law and the Prophets, did a brief study of the Intertestament period, and then after a short hiatus, we then began a study in the New Testament, and we're only 3 books away from finishing this study. Can you believe it? This is probably one of the fastest classes that we've had in Morris Road. Just kidding, Steve. Just poking fun. No, it's been great. I've learned a lot. I'm sure Danny can say that he's learned a lot. Steve can say that he's probably learned a lot. And Adam, I can probably speak for all of us when we say that we've learned a lot from instructing this study. Okay, so before we begin this evening, Eric, do you mind leading us in prayer?
Dear Lord, Father, we're blessed to be before you to study the Word. We pray that you be with us this evening, that we can gather more knowledge about you and your Word and your will for us today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, so typically if the letter is short, we'll try to read through it. Hopefully you've already read it through several times. But if you haven't, no worries. We're going to read it through at this time. So if you want to read along with me, we'll read 3 John in its entirety, and I'll be reading from the New King James Version. The elder, to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth. Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers. For I rejoice greatly when brethren came and testified of the truth that is in you, just as you walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers, who have borne witness of your love before the church. If you send them forward on their journey in a manner worthy of God, you will do well, because they went forth for his name's sake, taking nothing from the Gentiles. We therefore ought to receive such, that we may become fellow workers for the truth. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to have the preeminence among them, does not receive us. Therefore, if I come, I will call to mind his deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words, and not content with that, he himself does not receive the brethren, and forbids those who wish to, putting them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. He who does good is of God, but he who does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has a good testimony from all and from the truth itself, and we also bear witness. And you know that our testimony is true. I had many things to write, but I do not wish to write to you with pen and ink. But I hope to see you shortly, and we shall speak face to face. Peace to you. Our friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. So, I guess to begin with, who is the author of this letter? John.
Apostle.
The Apostle John, to be more specific. Yes. And what letters has he already written? Yeah, he's the penman for the Gospel of John, the penman for 1 John, 2 John, and then obviously here 3 John. So that's kind of a throw-up question. Way to get. Yes, Steve?
Don't forget Revelation.
Oh, and Revelation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Can't forget that. So yeah, 5.
It throws you because, it's not titled like many of the other letters.
The Apocalypse.
So different.
Yeah. We'll be getting into the book of Revelation in 3 weeks. Unless you come back on Sunday, then we'll also get into Revelation. So yes, John is the author. And each pretty much each letter we've come to, it seems like it might be a different audience, although the Gospel of John and 1 John may have been written to the same audience. There's some disputes about to whom 2 John is written. To whom is 3 John written?
Gaius.
Gaius, yes. Who is this Gaius?
A spiritual brother of John.
Yeah, he's a brother in Christ.
Or a spiritual child, I think he refers to as children. Spiritual child.
Yeah, one in a man who is a Christian, one who is standing firm for the truth. Do we find Gaius anywhere else in Scripture?
No.
We may. That's a trick question. We find the name in 4 other times in Scripture. But whether this Gaius is the same Gaius of Macedonia, who is the companion of Paul's 3rd missionary journey, found in Acts 19 and verse 29, we're not sure if that's him. Or it could be that this is Gaius of Derbe, Acts 20 and verse 4. Or perhaps it could be Gaius of Corinth, to whom Paul the Apostle stayed with while he wrote to the letter to the Romans, Romans 16 verse 23. Or if it was the Gaius who Paul had baptized. 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 14. Sure, it could be any one of these as we are uncertain of it. But it seems to be, it might have been a different Gaius, as this, we can see, was a common name in the 1st century. One of the 3rd century authors, I believe, who wrote he wrote a letter, but I guess by that time it was commonly assumed that John had baptized Gaius. So if you want to do further research into who this is, I'll leave it to you to do that. But as Adam always says, the message to us remains the same no matter to whom this is written. Okay, so from where is this epistle written?
Ephesus.
Ephesus, yeah. Tend to be the same location as the earlier epistles. Also tends to be dated around the same time. We have 1 John probably being written anywhere 85 to 90. 2 John coming a little bit after that, and then 3 John just maybe months or several years after the second epistle. And in 95 AD, we know that John had been exiled to Patmos, and it's from there that he wrote Revelation. But prior to that, his exilement, he writes these epistles from Ephesus. Okay. So, why does John write this letter?
Well, he gives a personal message to Gaius, and also warning about doubt the truth, and his problems that he gets. He's warning them about, and he seems to indicate that they'll go into this further once he gets to see them face to face.
Yeah. I see him writing this to commend this brother Gaius, who is standing firm for the truth, who
And
is
encourage him in his Christian life.
encouraging him in his Christian life, and as we'll touch later, Gaius is actively supporting those who are preaching the gospel, sending men forward to preach, welcoming them into his home. The type of love that we ought to emulate, as we've learned from 1 and 2 John, to have that brotherly love. And I see him as commending Gaius, but also writing a letter of warning for this brother Diotrephes, but then also giving an admonition or a testimony in regards to the character of Demetrius, who many believe may have been the one whom Paul used to send this letter to Gaius.
He rebukes Diotrephes, doesn't he?
He does.
It's
He
sort
does.
of a rebuke.
Yeah.
We'll handle him when I get there, you know.
Yeah.
Don't listen to him.
Thank you.
Apparently John had not John, but Demetrius had heard this. We don't know, I guess, if they were in the same congregation or not. But I guess Demetrius had heard this Diotrephes and how he thought and acted and overcome it and ignored it, so to speak.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Okay, so if you want a quick outline of the book, I have the introduction. John is writing introductory material to Gaius, verse 1 through 4. Then he moves on to a commendation of Gaius, verses 5 through 8. A condemnation of Diotrephes, verses 9 through 10. A recommendation of Demetrius, verses 11 and 12. And then some concluding thoughts in verses 13 through 14. So that's just a quick outline, kind of like how preachers enjoy 3 points. This letter has 3 points: Gaius, Diotrephes, Demetrius, conclusion. So here you go, Steve. Gives you a 3-point sermon. I know you usually preach 6 points, but
Probably.
I'm poking fun at you today. Okay, so many call this book The Tale of Three Men. Tale of Three Men. So as we have read and as we should apply applications back to our lives, as we read in James how the Bible is a mirror and we're to look at it, see our faults, and then change accordingly. What attributes, what applications can we make when we read about Gaius?
We should all be hospitable. That's one of the things we are told to do.
Yeah.
And become a part. Be hospitable, especially in supporting the missionaries and when they're spreading the word, and become a part of that process.
Yeah,
of that
be.
effort.
And I like that you bring that out first, because that leads into my question. Men, if we want to be elders, what do we have to be? We have to be servants. But there's a word that Paul uses in Timothy and Titus. Hospitable. We have to be hospitable. It's one of the, if you look at Paul's, if you look at that as a checklist, he mentions that if one wants to be an elder, for us men who want to be elders, we have to be hospitable. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, Titus 1 and verse 8. Be hospitable. And certainly Gaius is a good example of us to be hospitable, but not only for us men, but women. We can all be hospitable to welcome missionaries or to even just welcome Christians. I don't like the way that the trend has gone, and I know I'm young, so don't disdain me, but it wasn't that long ago that when preachers would go preach gospel meetings or preach in other towns, that they would stay with the brethren, that someone would reach out and they would stay with. I remember my grandparents would house dozens of preachers during lectureships or gospel meetings, and that was a fun time. We could go and I could sit down while my grandparents would talk to these various preachers, and I loved it. I would always try to try to get my little Bible and to impress them with things that I knew. But it seems as the culture is gone, it seems more and more that individuals are requesting and churches are sending individuals out to various hotels or motels or other things. But getting off my soapbox, I enjoyed those times where we had preachers stay with us, and I enjoy whenever we go places and I can stay with brethren that I know, and to have that time to have that fellowship with one another. Steve.
Not only that, it was also a time to talk to these men who were just a wealth of Bible knowledge, and like you know, I've had experience with that too, and having preachers come in from out of town, and a lot of times what they would do is stay with the brethren, and then maybe after services, a bunch of the Christians would go to that particular home, and they can't do that because they'll be in a hotel. Where they would go to that home and have coffee and pie and all that kind of stuff, and talk about, you know, all the work that's being done in the church, or maybe there's some Bible questions or something like that to you know, pick the brains of these knowledgeable people, and it's a blessing in that sense to make sure that we're putting that into practice in so many ways.
Yes,
You know, today the only opportunity we might get to be hospitable to someone traveling, preaching the word, is when we have a gospel meeting. And I think when we do have someone here, sometimes members take them into the home instead of a hotel, motel, and then other members invite them to their homes for meals while they're here, but we just don't get much opportunity to do that because we don't even have one a year. But we can individually help those we know that are doing missionary work, and not just wait for the congregation who may or may not be able to afford to help. We can afford out of our own pockets. You know, a little money goes a long way with those missionaries. We can do that as individuals today, any day of the week.
Yeah, we can, and certainly that's what John is striving to get across, is to have that mindset to help when you have the opportunity. Excuse me. Okay, so we've talked about Gaius being hospitable and how we can mirror that in our own lives to be hospitable, to welcome brothers and sisters who may be embarking to places or just to help one another as a Christian should. How else can we apply various traits that Gaius does and emulate it our own selves? Yes, Ms. Janice.
He has a good name for himself. You know, he didn't have to go and try to tell other people his good works or whatever. He was known among brethren. He was known to be hospitable or entertain people that he had never met before.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that it says how you do faithfully whatever you do for the brethren and for strangers who have borne witness of your love before the church. So it was well known that Gaius was a kind-hearted man, willing to help not only those for whom he shares a faith, but also for strangers. I guess if you were to take, if Gaius were to be placed into the parable of the Good Samaritan, he would be that Good Samaritan. Though others would leave the man by the wayside, Gaius seems like a man who would pick him up and place him on his donkey and take him to an inn and give him whatever treatment that he needed. He would act as a neighbor, as Jesus concludes that parable with. Who is this man's neighbor? And they say the one who aids him. So he offers aid, or is known to be kind.
Think of all of these unfortunates that are homeless on the streets of our cities, and even right here on the coast. How many people come by and take one, see to their needs? I don't know of it. I know there's food kitchens and that sort of thing where we can go and volunteer, and some of our members do that, several. But who goes by and takes one as a just to help? I don't see that in any city where I see this stuff on TV.
To pick one up and to aid them?
Like the example you just gave us in the Bible. We just don't do that.
Yeah.
It's too much trouble.
Okay, before I say anything, I'll let Steve and then Janice.
I'm sorry, what's the subject?
I think, are you basically saying why do we not see more of Gaius's actions towards the homeless population today? Okay.
Well, you got to take a look at it within its context. Its context is going to be the key there. In verse 5, especially when it's talking about the word strangers, oftentimes we think of the word strangers in the sense that it's people that we don't know. The word that's being used here for strangers is the Greek word xenos. You've heard the word as xenophobia. That's being thrown out. It means a foreigner. And what we have here is Gaius, the ones that he were helping were not strangers in the sense that we don't know them. They were in the sense that they were preachers from foreign places, and just like we have preachers within the church that would go to foreign lands, and when they would go to foreign lands, the brethren there within those foreign lands would accept those preachers as they are in the area doing their work, or they might be going on to another place. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we've got to be careful that we're not taking what we're seeing here in verse 5 and making application to where application isn't due. Whereas what we're seeing here, the application is as Christians we ought to be like Gaius in our efforts to help those preachers who are indeed going to foreign lands. We might have preachers from foreign lands coming here to help us. And even though they are indeed from foreign lands or wherever they are, their mission is to preach the gospel, and we need to do whatever we can, especially in our exercise of hospitality, to make sure that this is continued.
Good thoughts. Janice, do you still have?
I do. I think the conversation kind of veered to the Samaritan and how Gaius would have been one of the people to pick up this Samaritan. I would say nowadays, fast forward, you have to be careful because, you'll be like a Samaritan and nobody will be able to pick you up. But there's also things you can do to help others and not put yourself in jeopardy. I think we are to be kind and giving, but you need to be smart with it too. For instance, But you know, give them gift certificates so they can go and get something to eat. So I would just say that we just have to be smart, and even and with all of that being said, I can speak for myself. I know I don't do enough, but yeah, but we can still do more than what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. That's the phrase. I was kept thinking it, and I was like, certainly it's not wise as serpents. That doesn't sound right. But thank you for getting that right for me. Adam?
Going back to what Steve was saying, I certainly can see that, and that's certainly one way to look at it. I've always seen this as strangers, literally strangers. Like there's a difference between brethren, like preachers and strangers, and so how I was reading it, viewing it as that is, they, not only the brethren, the preachers whom he is receiving in the manner that we talk about when we're sending them forth in a manner worthy of God, that they are being received and they're bearing witness of his love and the brethren there for the church. Like they are testifying of these brethren, these people's love. And then also the strangers who may not, or who I say as non-Christians, who would need help, are also testifying of their love, that these people are Christians, these people are true Christians by their actions, and with one caveat that if they're brethren and strangers, you would send them forth in a manner worthy of God in two different ways. Like you wouldn't send, like if you're receiving somebody in who needs help, as we're talking about, or whether it's in your house or helping them in some way, you're not going to send them off on their way in the same way you'd send off a missionary. You wouldn't send them off with, whatever that, you know what I mean? Like, so it'll be a different way, but it's still in a manner worthy of God. And so we would, as was said, we need to be wise as serpents and as harmless as doves and those things. But I can see how this could be, maybe brethren that are in their circle of friends that they already knew who they're receiving in, and brethren who are, from outside the country, or they do not know, which would be maybe considered foreigners or strangers. But the way I see it is certainly that this is missionaries, brethren who are Christians, and these strangers who are not Christians. But either way, certainly see that.
Yeah. So with Gaius, we see that we need to be hospitable, we need to be kind, and then we also see that Gaius had a firm stand for the truth. So those are ways that we can draw applications. We need to be all of those. We need to continue to stand firm for the truth as he was recognized as doing, be kind, and be hospitable.
As individuals, we can look for ways to support missionaries or preachers who are spreading the word here and abroad.
Yeah, there's many ways.
There's preachers in this country that are very poor because they're in poor congregations, and as individuals, I think we have that responsibility. We don't have to wait for the church to do it. I think we should look for ways.
Yeah, there's a multitude of ways to help.
It wasn't the church doing this; it was individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. When I went through Memphis School of Preaching, I had many supporters who would support me financially as I went through school. And are you still supporting someone there? Or so we have someone who's supporting men who have decided that they want to pursue a passion to tell others about God and Jesus and His Word and how to obey it. And there's individuals who are sending in support to help train men to go and preach the gospel. There's people who support missionaries, who support men who are in works but may need help financially because the congregation isn't fully capable to support them.
So the first time I ever sent a donation to someone who was preaching outside the country, I was reluctant to do it because I thought I should give my money to my local congregation. But I really felt a sense of accomplishment in having a part in what that missionary was doing, because they make reports back to people that support them, and it really makes you feel good to know that your little bit helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, do you feel good at the moment? I think we just
No.
sent money to help a preacher in Ghana build up a congregation. So that should make you feel good as well, that we are actively using the funds that the members here contribute.
Most of the
to-
comments I've made tonight is
Yeah.
from an individual basis, like that Gaius
Yeah.
was doing this as an individual hospitality.
Yeah. So and
That's
whether
another issue.
whether you send your money directly to a missionary or to be used faithfully under the oversight of, and here we have men or under the oversight of an eldership who is ordained, who is given that responsibility and that to do what is best for the congregation.
It's the elders' responsibility and their decision, and it's my duty to abide by it after they make that decision.
Sometimes it's good. Yeah. What type of attitude do Diotrephes have?
Prideful.
Yeah. Prideful, put himself first. New King James says preeminence. He wanted to. I've heard stories about elderships where one elder tries to assume the most authority and to try to sway. I can see certainly there's probably preachers who try to step outside of their role of being a herald of the gospel and try to call the shots for a congregation. That would be someone who is acting like Diotrephes, to have the good feeling of having everyone look up to them as with a sense of worth.
He used to be he wasn't a servant, he was an autocrat, so to speak.
I like that. He wasn't acting as a servant should. Adam, you had your hand up. What did you say?
Just gonna say he's a bully.
Bully? Yeah. Yeah, so did he take your word?
Well, yeah. I mean, as far as your application too, and the attitude. I mean, he's all signs point to this individual acting as elder in the church. And I know a lot of commentaries would say that he was an elder in the church, but the fact that he was behaving the way that he does, he was already going outside of the limitations that the Bible puts on the eldership. I've heard it explained like this: every elder is subject to the eldership. Every elder is subject to what the Bible says an elder ought to be. First Peter chapter 5. Peter goes in, talks quite a bit about the attitude of an elder and what an elder ought to do. But this guy, he wants to have preeminence. He wants to be first. And I know that there's a lot of churches today that they practice head eldership. In fact, I was just looking at a website here from the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church that's saying note from the head elder. And they actually have positions. There is the elder, and then there is the head elder. But 1 Peter chapter 5 says in verse 4, talking to elders, when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. This chief shepherd, you know what it means in its original language? Head elder. Head shepherd is actually what that means. And what these individuals have done as claiming head eldership, head shepherd, have taken place of Christ.
sad to say that that's not too terribly uncommon.
No, it's
It-
yeah, you're right.
I think if you would go to every major city, you might find one or two congregations that has this problem going on within it. Going a bit further, New King James. Oh, Adam, you have something to say?
And this is nothing new. We had this going on in the first century. This was one of the reasons that caused the great apostasy of the church. You know, if you look back in church history, you know, the second, third century, this was one of the major issues that caused, that led to Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholicism. These things that it was, this idea of not only head elders but head churches who were over other satellite churches, and it's that same idea.
Yeah.
It's the same idea, and this is human nature. This has always been an issue, and that's why it is so important for elders to be qualified, and that's why there's so much emphasis on humility, on meekness, on all of these qualities that point to these things where you have your self-control, because when you have a multiplicity of leaders, it's easy to, if someone is more of a type A personality, domineering, to kind of take over, and the other ones kind of just fall back. And that's why these problems happen. But if you are spiritually mature, and you are that type of person, has a tendency, you can make sure that you're building up and filling in those deficiencies of others without being overbearing, without being domineering. And that's something that it happens, because if you are looked up to from everybody in the congregation as the elder to go to, it's easy to fall into that trap of, I'm more important, or I have more power and authority than the others. And so that's why it's so important that novices are not to be in this leadership position.
Yeah, good, very good thoughts. I didn't even think about
And somebody has to
that.
speak up sometimes.
Second, third century apostasy, but that's a good.
Diocletian was trying to take control of the church. He was encouraging sinful things and discouraging rightful things.
Yeah.
And today in a congregation, if we have a member who's trying to take control and doing similar things which are not accordance with the truth or in love, then someone needs to speak up, or that person can cause great harm in the church.
Oh yes, definitely. Janice.
Just to
Pretty quick.
piggyback on what Adam said is true. If you have someone with a strong personality and other people are kind of laid back, it's easy for somebody to go buck wild and they're like in head over everything. But I think that the key here is we've forgotten why they were put there, and we've forgotten what our goal is, and that is to get to heaven. And so if you lose sight of that, then you start thinking more on the fleshly side. And, you got all kinds of people running around just buck wild, just because they forget that the reason they're in this position is to shepherd Christ's flock.
Yeah. I don't know what your other translations may say. New King James says, prating about with malicious words. I take this to be that he was a mean person. He would call individuals names, maybe even slander individuals. And certainly that's not how we're to act as a Christian. We are to love one another, and I see this as he did not demonstrate the type of brotherly love that John hearkens so heavily upon. And those are ways that we can try to learn from him, to not be this ugly, nasty person that we see here who enjoys taking the preeminence. We see him as being prideful. We need to do the opposite. We need to be humble, examine humility, to love one another, to speak kind words to one another.
Do we know if John the apostle, ever did visit as he promised in the other letters and in this letter?
I don't think so. Maybe he gets to it in Second Revelation, but I don't know. I don't know. Adam?
One other thing about about compromise. You know, we have this idea here from this man that he's not going to stop at anything to make sure that, you know, his will be done. Similar to, you know, the Pharisees and the scribes. When Jesus was doing things they didn't like, they wanted to erase him. They wanted to murder him. You know, they wanted to get him out of the picture altogether. And when we allow compromise, even a little compromise, to come in, it opens the floodgates for everything else. To the point where, you know, you're going to stop at nothing to make whatever you want happen. And it kind of goes back to what Janice was saying, you know, that if we forget what we're here for, what our purpose is, we get switched around and we forget that, you know, this is a spiritual thing, this is a temporary thing here, and, you know, turns into, you know, wanting the preeminence and the power and everything. You don't hold on to that at all costs, and that's kind of sounds like what he's doing here.
Yeah. And then I said that this was a tale of three men. So we have Gaius, who is hospitable, Diotrephes, who is a prideful, loves preeminence, and then we have Demetrius, who is well known and well loved, well recommended by all, and certainly that tells to his character of being a Christian to all that he's come across. So if we can put on that trait to act in a loving Christian manner to all that we come in contact with, and we can be a Demetrius as well. Any concluding thoughts or desires?
It's just interesting seeing the contrast in the characteristics of these men. Of course, I would say that the biggest takeaway here is that we're not to imitate what's evil, imitate what is good. So here it is, you have an example of how not to act, and you have an example of how to act. Don't act like this guy, act like this guy. And it's just amazing the contrast
Yeah, it is.
between these individuals.
And I don't know if he intended it this way, but how's that phrase go? You have 2 ears to hear and
Maybe one mouth.
2 ears and 1 mouth, so that you can hear
Twice as much talk.
Yeah, hear twice as much. So practice twice as much good as what. I don't know. Don't practice evil, but I don't know. Does that? I hope that analogy goes well. But you have these two good examples to show what is evil and portray it more clearly. So.
There's some good contrast in those